Hey there, React wizards! Did you know that generic component can dramatically reduce code redundancy in your React application? Yep, you heard that right. Today, we're going to dive into the magical world of generic components and discover how they can save you a ton of time and headaches as well. So, what is the deal with these generic components? Anyway, well, think of them as the Swiss Army knife of your React application. They are like the one size fits all solution for your code, helping you build scalable and reusable components. If you ever found yourself copying and pasting the same code over and over and over again, generic components are here to save the day. Now, let's be real. We all have been there. Building a React application, everything is going smooth, and then boom! You notice your code is starting to look like a never-ending loop, like a déjà vu. Same logic, different components. It's messy, hard to maintain, and kind of makes you want to throw your keyboard out of the window. Now, here is what that might look like in this very simple code here. So what we do have here, we have two components, okay? And what they are doing, they're accepting a parameter, which is an array of some items, and it's mapping through that array and rendering the item in your UI. The only difference between these two is the type of the item in your array. Now imagine if you needed to create similar components for other types like objects or booleans. You will end up with a whole bunch of almost identical components. That is just a recipe for a headache and a messy code. Now let's refactor this code to create a generic component. So I'll declare a new component called list. Okay, and the way I can tell my application that this is a TypeScript generic component is by using a syntax to define it, which we'll do like this, and then we write T, and T stands for generic type, and then comma, and then we close this. Okay, then of course this component accepts one argument, which called the items, we'll call it. So items, okay, and then I have to define this type of items. So I'll create a type later. I'll call it list props, okay, and this list props will accept a generic type of T. So I'll pass to it. So I'm saying whatever generic type of my components, that's the one I'm passing down to my props as well. And of course, this component will give us back a React component, so GSX. Oops, not like that. GSX dot element, that will be an arrow function, and then the return will be same what we have done here with a little bit difference. Okay, so I'll just copy that and paste. So you can see it is, we are going to do the same thing, okay, except for strings. Of course, my parameter now name is items. I'll call this one item. I will add index to use for my key, so I'll use index here and item there. Okay, now I have to define my list prop. So I'll create type. I'll call it list prop, and that accepts this type, generic type with it as well. So I'll do like this. Okay, my Visual Studio Code keep adding stuff, not my day. Okay, let me remove it again. And equal. Okay, so we have one parameter called items, and that's what we know it will be an array, but of generic type of T. Okay. So it can be a string, can be numbers, can be booleans, can be object, can be anything. Okay. Now this looks good, so you can see everything looks great. Now only one problem here. It says complaint in lane 31, and what it says is that the type T is not assignable to type React node, which makes sense. When you are inside your return, it's expecting that the element you'll pass there should be a JSX, some strings or plain numbers or HTML elements, something like that, right? Something you can display or add to your DOM elements. But when you put a type, a generic type, it doesn't know what that item is, okay? So because of this, we need to add one more parameter right here, and that will be a function called render items. You can call it anything you like. I'll call it render item, okay? And I need to add this type right here, render item, hopefully my spelling is right, and that will be a function that will accept this item as a parameter, which should be of type t. And it will give us back a gsx dot element. Okay, so we're telling this function will take an item and give us back a gsx element. Now we'll go back to line 32 and we'll not just say item, but we'll say render item, then pass that one as argument. Okay, so render item, and I'll say item. And there we go. Now your code is much cleaner, much more happier. Okay, and what we can do, we can now just go and remove all this. We don't need that anymore. Okay, and then we can see how we can call these. Okay, for example, let's create const numbers array. Okay, call it 1, 2, 3. Okay, and let's create another array which calls strings, for example. Oops, const strings, and I will say that one, for example, will be hi there. Okay, and now what we'll do, we just can create a component like this: list, okay, items, and first one we say it's number, okay, and then you have render item, and you can define your function. Okay, let's say this function for me will take this element called item, and it will give me back, for example, a span element, for example. Okay, and then my item will be displayed there. So that's what we're just making sure that our components understand that this render item in the end will just give us back a JSX element. Okay, and if you don't need any extra styling, you just do spans, or you just can add empty fragments. Okay, so same thing we can do for numbers, for strings, sorry, and we can say here strings, and then here, for example, let's say this one I want it to be strong. Okay, I want it to be bold, for example. So just to make my editor happy, I have to wrap this within one fragment parent, okay, just to make it look good. So you can see that this is much more better, okay? One component that can handle any type of data that you throw at it. Not only is easier to read, but also is much easier to maintain and also saves you from writing tons of repetitive code. So here comes the wow moment. Let me tell you about a project where generic components made a huge difference for me. We were working on this big application with dozens of forms. Before we used generic components, each form had its own custom logic and its own nightmare to manage. Once we refactor it using these generic components, we cut down our code by half. And guess what? Making changes become as easy as a pie.